For Creamer Media's Polity, I'm Tabi Madiba, researcher and analyst. Professor Raymond Suttner joins me to discuss pit toilet school death and human dignity. Welcome, Professor.
Hi.
4 years ago in Limpopo, Michael Komabe's 5-year-old body was found in a pit latrine. And last week, the same incident happened in the Eastern Cape, whereby Lumka Mkejo's body was also found in the pit latrine. So what can you say about human dignity?
Well, you know, it's very, very concerning that the Department of Basic Education was committed to remedying a number of infrastructural problems in the Eastern Cape. These problems happen elsewhere, but the Eastern Cape is the worst. It's a very poor part of the country. 40% of the people are on social grants, if I remember correctly. So it's a very, very poor area, and the conditions of infrastructure are very, very bad. Like a large number of schools have not got ablution facilities at all. They've got no water, no electricity, or if there's a toilet, in some cases 300 people are sharing one toilet. And in this case, a young 5-year-old child appears to have gone on her own to the toilet and fallen in. Unless there's foul play, we don't know. Apparently the toilet that she used is one that was not supposed to be used. It was not an accident in the sense that an accident is something that is wholly unexpected, that is something that you can't prepare for. Now, if you don't take the money that is available and devote it to dealing with the infrastructural needs of these schools, well, then you expose children to these dangers. And when they succumb to those dangers, that's not an accident. And 534 million, if I remember correctly, of the budget for infrastructure in the Eastern Cape was not spent. So it's not as if there was no funds. The advocate appearing for basic education in Grahamstown in a court case claimed that there were not resources. But what resources there are have not been spent. So that there is clear responsibility on the part of the Department of Basic Education at a national and a provincial level for this child's death. They didn't directly will that this child should die, but they did not take the steps that could have avoided this unnecessary death. And so I feel that it's very, very important. The President has issued an instruction to the Minister of Basic Education to tell him, give him a timeline for ending pit latrines. And that was last week, so let's see what happens.
And what can we say about the South African government looking at about 530 million rand that was not spent on fixing school infrastructure?
Well, you know, it's a callousness, an indifference. I mentioned in the article that I wrote that when we fought the struggle to liberate South Africa, we were motivated by certain passion and compassion, especially towards the poor and the vulnerable. What this death shows is that the authorities, their hearts have gone cold. There's a certain cruelty in not spending money that can be used to allow children to go to school in safety, not just in safety from falling into ditches, but safety in terms of losing your life and dying through drowning in feces. This is a most terrible way of dying, and I don't know where else in the world this is happening at this point in time. I'm sure it does happen in other places, But that it happens in a country with a human rights constitution like ours is actually shameful. But that it happens and continues to happen indicates a shamelessness on the part of the authorities.
Can we say the government is not doing enough to protect children's right to basic education?
Well, in a number of different ways, not just infrastructure. It's not doing enough because I'm not analysed the budgets in detail, but we know there was the scandal with textbooks in Limpopo. There are a number of ways in which people like Equal Education have shown that the school system is very damaged. They have the slogan, fix the norms. In other words, abide by the norms to which you have agreed in order to make basic education fitting place with proper facilities, not mud huts, not asbestos structures, but proper structures with all the resources. And there was a plan. By 2016, this would be provided. By 2020, that would be provided. So that schools would have facilities by 2023 or something, like internet, all these things. And it is provided in some cases, but it's very uneven.
Do you think the Equal Education will succeed in its litigation against the department?
I don't, I haven't studied the court case in detail, but my guess is that the litigation relates to them failing to meet basic needs, and the way in which the legislation and the constitution is phrased seems to suggest it's a question of whether they can be progressively realized or must be immediately realized. And I think they may be forced to find the resources to immediately realize this. Now we know that the budget is very tight, and that yesterday in the Life is a Dhlamini case, huge damages were awarded to families. So there's a number of unanticipated costs, including this. But I think government needs to look long and hard at where it is allocating its resources, whether ministers, MPs, SOE chairs, boards, all of these people are not being paid in excess of what is necessary. The president and those with him are at the moment busy trying to regularize government and eliminate corruption. Now once you do that, there will be money that could be put aside for these things.
And lastly, do you think the department will now act on improving basic infrastructure norms after the second pediatric death that was reported last week?
Well, the president has more or less ordered the minister so that some effort is certainly likely to happen, but there's a lot that has to be done to remedy it. Whether they will have the stamina to continue will depend on how the government as a whole performs, whether they hold basic education accountable.
Thank you, Professor.
Thanks a lot.
That was Professor Raymond Suttner speaking to Creamer Media's Polity about Pete Toilet School death and human dignity.